Welcome back to the Brave Writer podcast, where we provide professional development for parent educators. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Julie. Hello, everybody.
So good to be with you all today. It feels really important, today's topic, because in my view, it's the foundation of learning. What do you think, Melissa?
I agree. This is where it all began for me.
We have a quote on the art of narration from one of our educational heroes, Charlotte Mason. To kick off today's podcast, we want to talk about the power of narrating as a true educational tool that helps kids make learning their own. So, Melissa, I'm going to read a little of it, and then you can read the second half. How about that?
Alrighty.
So our poor audience doesn't get bored listening to me only. Okay, here we go. Charlotte Mason says, narrating is an art, like poetry making or painting, because it is there in every child's mind, waiting to be discovered, and is not the result of any process of disciplinary education. A creative fiat calls it forth. Let him narrate, and the child narrates fluently, copiously, in ordered sequence, with fit and graphic details, with a just choice of words, without verbosity or tautology, so soon as he can speak with ease. What language! I sometimes feel like, wow, I do not have a good vocabulary after I read something like that. How about you?
Oh, it's so rich. I love her writing. It makes me work, and that's one of the reasons I love it. Well, she continues, this amazing gift with which normal children are born is allowed to lie fallow in their education. Bobby will come home with a heroic narrative of a fight he has seen between Duke and a dog in the street. It is wonderful. He has seen everything, and he tells everything with splendid vigor in the true epic vein. But so ingrained is our contempt for children that we see nothing in this but Bobby's foolish, childish way. Whereas here, if we have eyes to see and grace to build, is the ground plan of his education.
Oh my gosh. Wow. If we have eyes to see and grace to build, narration is the ground plan of a child's education. Wow, 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 wow.
I have so much to say about just this quote. And I want to say first that, Julie, I think it's hilarious and telling that when we were preparing to record this episode, you said, hold on, I want to grab real quick a quote about narration. And I said, well, I grabbed one from Charlotte Mason and I put it in our doc. And you scrolled down to it and you said, that's the one.
I mean, I've quoted it so many times. I practically have this middle section memorized. Let him narrate. And the child narrates fluently, copiously, in ordered sequence with fit and graphic details. There is something about the way Charlotte expands when she is trying to get a point across that is very effective. What she's basically saying is children who talk are saying important things.
Yes, it emphasizes that this is already happening. This is a natural human process. Our children learn to speak and they immediately go to storytelling. And those stories are rich with detail. It is what they have noticed about living in the world.
That's right. And just to be clear, we're not talking about stories like fairy tales, although they will narrate those as well. When we say storytelling, we just mean telling the story of whatever it is they are observing or want to communicate. So it could be that they're just telling you about how their younger brother is learning to walk. They might be telling you how they brushed their teeth, but there is a style of self-expression that is rising to the level of narration when a child is patient with their own language and interested to convey that detail to you. And children do it pretty freely. If you're around kids, you'll notice.
And I think what Charlotte calls out here is that it's very easy for adults not to take advantage of this innate skill and proclivity.
What an amazing statement to say, but so ingrained is our contempt for children. Woo! That is packing a punch.
Yeah, you really have to think about that.
Yes.
We don't feel like, we know we don't have contempt for children, but I think it through and I think, oh, right. Like, how often have I, as a parent, felt impatient because I wanted to be focusing on something else?
That's right.
Or holding forth, perhaps, right?
Holding forth, or they're giving us details that feel like they're veering away from the main point.
Yes.
A lot of times when a child is narrating, they become fixated on an aspect of a topic and they are not oriented to summary. So you might say, where are we in this novel? And the child does not summarize the first chapter up to chapter 8 where you left off. They remember vividly one scene from chapter 7.
Right.
And they are telling you in vivid detail what happened in this one tiny scene. I have parents say to me, they say too many words. They don't know how to sort and summarize. To that, I say, let him or her narrate. Because summary is an advanced skill that comes much later, usually in the teen years. And what we're really wanting to cultivate in the early years is facility with language and attention to detail. Those are very important skills for young kids.
Yes. And I think the corollary of that, let him narrate language is, and let us listen.
Oh, yes.
I do recall a time when I talked to my older kids, they were still little, about the difference between like journalist style and novelist style, and talked about moments when like not burying the lead was important, like not telling me the whole make-believe game that led up to the toddler falling off the bunk bed. Lead with the baby fell off the bed. But even that distinction, understanding that distinction is a useful tool for kids as long as we are allowing them that space to tell their stories with rich detail. And we're not viewing that as like something with impatience, downtime, wasted time. Let's get back to the point.
Yes, I love that. When we talk about narration being the ground plan for an education, I always like to recall my professor in my graduate school program who said that a PhD is just having the best vocabulary in the subject domain, right? Like, that's really what it means to get a doctorate, is to cultivate your vocabulary to be that specific and that precise. And what we see happening as children gain facility in a particular domain, whether it's caring for a beloved pet or observing family actions around the house because that's their main source of information, or a book they're reading, or a game they're playing, or a sport that they're in, when they are in their own language domain of something where they have some modicum of expertise, the narrations are the richest. And it is through using that vocabulary in a deliberate way that has that sequence, that sort of organizational property that Charlotte mentions in this quote, that they are now encoding that as learning. It is becoming a very specific part of the way they interpret and understand the world. And that's what an education is designed to give them.
And we can facilitate that by encouraging. When those stories begin, we can ask questions that draw out more detail and help them learn how to recall specific juicy details from the situation they're so excitedly telling us about.
Now, the reason that I wanted us to talk about narration today, Melissa, is that Artemis 2, the space crew that just did the flyby of the moon, totally caught me off guard when I found out that their training didn't just include engineering, didn't just include spaceflight, didn't just include physical athletic training. They took 2 years of courses in 2 surprising fields. One was photography, and the other was the power of using descriptive language on their mission. I about fell out of my chair. Did you see that?
I did. And I was like squealing because there it is, the power and importance of the humanities. Yes, we want our astronauts to be poets as well.
That's right. And as Charlotte says in this quote, narrating is an art like poetry making or painting. We could add in there photography, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The reason that the astronauts needed that training is that part of their mission was to be the ears and eyes, and even the hands and feet of all of humanity, right? We didn't get to fly by the backside of the moon. They did. And how were we going to have that parallel experience without language and images?
And it was an extraordinary experience right here on Earth, just watching, just listening. They painted such a rich picture that I did feel a part of it. My imagination soared and my emotions were stirred. And for a minute, I saw people on the internet like experiencing joy and bliss.
Absolutely. I thought it might be fun to even read a few of their narrations. Melissa, could you kick us off? Because, I was sitting there listening, thinking, oh my gosh, these people are really helping me experience what they're experiencing.
Yes. Okay. So I looked up the transcript and found the day that they were observing the dark side of the moon. And Reed says, all right, Jenny, the moon is decidedly large on the window today. We can see all of Oriental angular ring, and goes on to describe specific things. That far side that is right on the limb is extremely mountainous. It's a high grazing angle. It's pretty awesome to just look out and see all of these sights, still primarily seeing whites and grays. Maybe I can convince myself on the far side there's just some hues of brown, very light, very, very faint. It's beautiful.
Oh my gosh. And he ends by saying that it's near the most prominent feature and glowing bright right now. And then the people that he is talking to over the headset back at Mission Control say, that's beautiful, Reed. Thanks for bringing us all up there with you. That is all you have to say to your own child, right? When your child's describing, the dog running in the backyard, that's beautiful. I can see Rocky sprinting down the yard. Thank you for sharing that with me.
That was one of my favorite parts about the whole experience, was hearing Mission Control be like brave writer parents, basically, like saying, after Victor gives a description, that's awesome, Victor, really good description. It's easy to imagine what you're looking at.
Exactly. And in fact, one of the things when people are describing, we got some colors in there, we got some relationships. Sometimes we even include information that's more technical. Victor had said maybe about 10% on the western limb is in the terminator, and you can really see variations in terrain. There's clearly some large elevation changes on the western edge that's in the terminator area. And I remember when I was watching, I didn't know what the terminator was. And then all of a sudden, Mission Control narrated back to us that the terminator was the dividing line between the light side and the dark side of the moon. And so he was describing what could never have been seen before. These are absolutely first impressions because no one had been on that line. We had only seen the light side of the moon. So imagine being charged with the responsibility of putting something no one's ever seen into language that could be transcribed, understood, and studied for science. Wow.
The parts that just gave me goosebumps were when they would give us a simile or a metaphor so that we could help make sense of this picture that they're seeing that's so different from what we're looking at here on Earth, right? And like Victor at one point said, the grays there are almost like looking down on a forest where you can see variations, splotches between light and dark gray. And then at another point, Christina said, she was describing something, and she said, it actually looks like a large healing wound.
Oh my gosh.
And the thought of that, like a wound on the moon, a healing wound on the moon, I couldn't get over it.
No, that's so vivid, correct? It's so vivid.
Yeah.
And I think we realize as we're grappling with trying to describe things that we often draw similarities or contrasts as a way to draw more people into our descriptions. That is another way that we encode our own learning. We make connections. Charlotte Mason is famous for saying a science of relations, right? So here she is taking a medical experience that we've all had, a gaping wound, and applying it to what she observes on a completely different landscape, right? A moon is not made of skin. It's not made of blood. It's not made of cells in that way. So she is giving us a point of comparison, but we are still left with the unknowability. But now we're closer than we were. That's what a good narration does. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's only talking about the thing. It's trying to get us closer to the thing.
Right. And I want to say, I think very young children fall to that quite naturally. When you think of like a 4-year-old telling you a story and it was big like a mountain.
That's right.
You know, like they'll proffer their own similes quite naturally because that's what their minds are doing in the process of the telling. It is making sense of experience and forming those connections like live.
100%. And they do not have like a trove of cliches yet.
Right.
So a lot of times their comparisons are so original and fresh. I remember when Johanna was trying to describe the color of my guitar, and she said it looked like the color of an unripe cantaloupe. And I was like, that is an amazing comparison. And, you know, cantaloupes are round, and she was looking at the round circle in the middle of the guitar and the edges around it. And I thought, wow, look at where her brain went. It's like hunting for that perfect, you know, image and comparison, but she doesn't have any cliches. So she's literally finding fresh connections, which makes it so precious. Ditch the desk and rediscover the joy of science. Is your spring homeschool routine feeling a little stale? When the sun starts shining and the warm weather is drawing you outdoors, it's the perfect time to pivot, to lean into unit studies and to breathe new life into your homeschool day. Brave Writer has a free guide called a Build a Science Unit Study with Brave Writer, and it shows you how to turn your child's natural wonder into an engaging learning adventure that combines subjects for both ease and delight. Imagine checking off those end-of-the-year boxes and knowing you've covered science in a meaningful way. Head over to the show notes where we've got a link for you so that you can download a free copy of our Brave Writer Build a Science Unit Study that is just perfect for spring. And now, back to the show.
I loved, as I was looking around at the Artemis whole mission to prepare for today, I noticed that NASA has provided an activity for kids called Observe the Moon Like an Astronaut. And it walks through like several steps to do. But this is the part that I was just like out of my chair with excitement. There's a point in the activity when they're guiding kids through writing this description and drawing it. And it says, have them write down and sketch what they see. What features can they identify? What shapes do they notice? What colors and shadows do they see? What do they think happened there in the past?
Wow. What a fun idea. And there's a link, right, where they could go and look at the moon and comment on what they're looking at.
We'll put it in the show notes. What I loved about this, Julie, is it really mirrors the ways that once we want to move to a kind of guided approach to help kids develop those skills of keen observation and putting those details into words. This is exactly what NASA is walking families through with that activity. How can we, and you can tell this is the same training the astronauts got. Notice color, notice shadows. What does it make you think of? What are your guesses about what might have happened there in the past? What features can you identify?
And what shapes, right? Growing that lexicon of shapes. Is it oval? Is it a circle? Is it a sphere? Is it a dome? These are various ways of noticing round things, but each round thing has a specific property. And so as you become more detailed in your capacity to observe, you actually enrich your vocabulary to become more specific. One of the things that I liked is that you brought up keen observation. And for those of you who own either Growing Brave Writers or Help My Kid Hates Writing, there are lots of questions that I have included to help grow the powers of observation for your kids, and it'll simultaneously boost yours as well. we aren't just asking a question like, appeal to the five senses or tell me how it tastes. We're actually asking you to do investigative experiences with whatever you're observing. So if you are looking at color, comparing it to Crayolas or Prismacolor pencils or paints, paint chips, so that you have more specific language, cornflower instead of blue, right? Then we have you do things like rubbing something on your arm and then rubbing it on your cheek to feel the difference in sensation, right? Depending on where
Yes.
you touch it. If you're going to observe its shape, are you looking from above or below or directly at it? Is it in a point of reference that you can see the top or not? These are questions, does it make a big shadow at noon or, or late in the day? Like, these are questions you can ask your kids to help them start to actually appreciate that what they see quickly is not what's there. There's more there.
Yes. The more you look at it, the more you see. And this can be done very casually,
Right.
observationally, without writing. It can be done conversationally. That was the word I was looking for. We can have just noticing types of conversations, especially when kids are very young. Julie, what age did you start shifting from oral narration to written narrations with your kids?
Such a good question, because we did a lot of jotting down. But I think I started doing written narrations when we started art appreciation. That was the place where I really started it, because they were able to keep their gaze on the picture. We usually did draw or paint your own version of the painting first and then narrate. So they were first really immersing themselves in the visual and then they would write. And I have so many of these. So that's why I think that's where I started. But we also did narrations after Susan Wise Bauer's wonderful series, Story of the World. We would read a chapter and then we would have them do an illustration and then write their narration of what aspect of the story they illustrated. And I have reams of those, notebooks full of those. So probably once they were comfortable with handwriting, I let them go at it. And those narrations got longer the older they were.
Right, right. I made a rookie mistake with my oldest. She was a very early reader. And in my head, that equated to being an early writer. And she was not ready for that yet. So we were doing lots of oral narrations. I had read Charlotte Mason and I really bought into this plan of read a story or read an Aesop's fable and then have her tell it back, right? Or read a book about volcanoes. And now you tell me what you remember. And it was never to catch you out with what you got wrong or what you missed. It was what sticks in the child's mind. We did a lot of that, but she was quite young when I said, okay, read this and now write a narration of it. And I noticed the difference in length between her written and oral narrations was significant. It would be very truncated if she had to do the writing herself. And that's when I leaned into, yes, a long, years long, jot it down phase.
Yes. And that is absolutely a valid way to capture narration. It does not have to be in the child's own handwriting. That said, another step that you can take if you want to help train your child to write their own narrations is for you to transcribe it first and then have your child copy some of it. So it's like a two-step. They're saying the words freely without the restriction of handwriting, but then they're copying your handwriting so that they are putting their own words in their own handwriting. And sometimes that two-step really helps to solidify not only what they were thinking, because they're putting it in writing, but they also have the power now of hearing their own language in their heads while they are transcribing. And that is a nice middle step for kids who are still learning to handwrite and spell and punctuate.
Yeah, that is so good as a bridge. And there are so many forms that narration can take. It can be drawing a picture. It could be, doing a diagram of a bug they're all excited about, and then you together labeling, body parts.
That's true. It can also be acting. You can act out the colonial era. You can act out being an astronaut on their way to the moon, right? Like you can do those things. You could even be the moon. I remember we did a solar system tea party at night one year. And I remember Dottie's daughter came over dressed as Jupiter.
Amazing.
It was amazing. Her interpretation was spot on. It was amazing. So I think these are the kinds of ways that we talk about narration. It can extend obviously beyond just standing in front of the fireplace, firing off 4 sentences that are cogent and clear about the last chapter you read.
Right. Making a video for grandma.
Yeah, right.
And I did start to make a distinction in my own mind. It wasn't really something I put out in the open with them. Of some narrations were about capturing the material. We've learned something together. You telling it back to me is a memory tool. Articulating it helps it stick in your mind. Like we've all experienced that as adults. When something funny happens and you're driving home from the thing and you're telling the story in your head because you want to get the punchline right when you tell it to your partner later on, right? But then there was like narration as a bridge toward original writing. And those were, as they got older, and from, I would say age 10 on is when I really start to roll out like, okay, now we've read this thing, write about it, and giving questions, and some of it being in a free writing style, some of it being more of like a think piece question prompt.
We did that too. I remember when I read the children's Homer to my kids. I don't know if I regret this or not, but I did have Johanna and Noah write a narration for every single chapter. So we would finish the chapter. Johanna loved it. Noah did not. I still required it. Do I feel good about that? I don't know. He's a good writer today, maybe. But it was my way of having one experience where they persisted to the end of a book and they had their own sort of shorthand Cliff's Notes version of an entire book. I think for me, at least doing that once felt really important and meaningful. And I love rereading their narrations. It's really, I think what narration is, and here's why I especially like it, it calls upon your vocabulary. So you get to see the linguistic dexterity of your child when they narrate and when you give them these opportunities, whether it's in response to art, in response to a book or poem, in response to a movie or a game. This is literally looking out the window of your spaceship and describing what is in that window, right? That's what we're asking our kids to do.
Right. And when you talk about it being in response to something, I think that's a really important part of developing as a writer and a speaker, because that practice of narrating something that you've read or learned together or witnessed allows kids to develop facility with language that is separate from any kind of pressure to invent.
Oh, nice.
Like thinking up what to say, whether in, a form of creative writing, or even the type of essay writing that we cultivate when they're older, where you've got an argument you're putting forth or a message you want to convey, perhaps. You get there by becoming comfortable with putting thoughts into words, period. And when we give kids opportunities to do that without the pressure of invention, and I hope that makes sense, the way I'm using the word invention here.
No, I love it. I think it's brilliant because a lot of times we are wanting kids to use their imaginations because we think that's easier, but you're a novel writer. I do not think that's easier. It's easier to talk about something I have direct experience of, something that I know really well. That's why when we teach our writing class, Brave Writer 101, we have kids pick something they know well and love to write about. And it's almost always from an autobiographical point of view, because what you know in your direct experience is the easiest to give language to. If I say, write about the space alien who came to the school cafeteria, and I say this to a homeschooled child who's never been to a school cafeteria, doesn't know an alien, that invention is often going to bring a poverty of language because there just isn't enough familiarity to draw out that rich detail. It sounds more fun to think about that. And some kids may just love going down that rabbit trail, but the vast majority of children do better talking about their hot chocolate because they've got it right in front of them and they can reference it while they're writing about it.
Right. What's so funny to me is that a novelist who wants to write a novel about a space alien hardly ever starts with sitting down and writing the story. They start with world building.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And writers have different processes that they go through for figuring out the structure and the characters and the details of the world. But they're not writing, I mean, maybe sometimes, but for the most part, if you're starting out like, I'm going to write a story about an alien, that writing that you do, if you're writing right out of the gate, is going to be more like free writing to help you figure out what it is you're creating.
It's funny you bring that up because one of the best new classes for Brave Writer is called World Building. And one of our student moms wrote to me last week with her son's comments about this class. And this is unprompted, but maybe this one is from Gamers Right. But it was because he was also building worlds. Here's what he said. I have been really resistant to writing before this class, but having loose, fun prompts has helped me grow my skills. After taking the class, I would absolutely recommend this to all my friends who enjoy mysteries. I would say the Gamers Right class is about writing fun stories, making friends with people. I wish it could be a different world every time you take the class. Okay.
Oh.
Yes. So I wanted to say that because here's a good example of what we're talking about, right? You're putting yourself in a position to have prompts that draw out what you know and that build a world and create that sense of momentum for writing. And writing depends on momentum. It's very hard to write when you are sort of bankrupt and out of language. This is why astronauts had to take 2 years of classes to become adept at using their scientific vocabulary and their poetic capabilities to provide cogent, powerful, apt, fit, graphic descriptions.
It really made me think, like, the work of the poet and the work of the scientist is the same work, which is turning experience into language so that it can be shared with the rest of humanity.
1,000%. So if I were to sum up how I think about this narration as a ground plan for education, be sure to give yourself credit when you see it occurring. If your child is in the car and you're on the way to soccer practice and that child starts telling you some interesting little story, make a note on your calendar. My child and I just had this really rich conversation about Minecraft. They narrated to me for the entire drive, and that drive was 15 minutes, and we talked about it the whole time. In our world, our kids will be called on to speak freely, public speaking and in writing. And the more confidence they have in initiating those ideas and thoughts through verbal language, the more comfortable they will be at the point that it's called out of them, right? When they're on an interview, when they're having a conversation, when they're on a first date. These are all public speaking moments.
Right. And Julie, I love that your example right there was itself a form of narration. I, as a homeschooling mom, recording what happened today, am narrating our day. I'm narrating our experience. I'm noticing the moments of learning. Maybe I'm capturing a fragment of what was said that was funny or beautifully descriptive. And I'm putting that in a form. And I want to say, having sent some kids to college, that writing a narrative transcript became part of my work as a homeschooling mom. How can I describe what we did in a way that it makes sense to a college admissions officer, that they see the rich learning that happened?
What's beautiful is Brave Writer gives you a bunch of tools to help you learn how to do that. So in Growing Brave Writers, we have a section at the end of every chapter that has a word box of all the educator language of the skills that process was meant to teach. And then we write it in a sample written narrative to show you how to craft that to describe for yourself what your child learned. so that if you're in a charter school or you are accountable to anyone, or even just for your own record keeping, you can write a narrative that fits the lessons that child is learning. And it also serves to tutor you in what those meaningful objectives are. So that's Growing Brave Writers. Our quills, darts, arrows, boomerangs, and slingshots have skills trackers and weekly planners to help you with that same language development and acquisition. Because I don't know about you, Melissa, but I came into homeschooling with no educator training whatsoever. I did not know the language of education. And it's helpful to have someone start to populate your mind with the vocabulary of learning.
I was excited when I realized that I would get to indulge my English major, drama minor self as a teacher for the rest of my life.
I mean, honestly, I always think public speaking and writing are like the two most important things. I'm sure someone who loves math would throw math in there too. But those are really, public speaking is overlooked, and just being able to have self-possession. If you're going to be a maid of honor and you have to give that toast at the wedding,
right,
you should feel comfortable. If you have to deliver a eulogy, if you have to be interviewed for a job, if you have to speak at some kind of a fundraiser and introduce all the people who helped you put it on, feeling comfortable in that role is a really valuable skill you can be teaching your kids.
I had no idea the amount of time I would need in my adult life to be able to present a medical history succinctly and clearly to a new doctor.
Wow. Another great example of narration. Wow. That's like a life and death level example.
Right.
Wow.
And when I learned that, I needed journalist style.
Don't bury the lead.
For those moments. Right. No burying the lead. I think that one way for us to think about why narration matters so much, why it's so powerful, is to think about a moment in your life when you told someone a story and it landed. When it had an impact on the person you were talking to, whether it made them laugh or it comforted them in a moment when they needed that, or it aroused some sympathy in the listener. You know how that feels, that connection and that feeling of something just happened here that really, really matters.
That's a beautiful example. I love that.
And we can be like Mission Control when we're listening to our kids, sharing those sometimes long narrations of the video game or the leaf.
You know what that makes me think of? When the astronauts were overcome with love of the moon and they started describing it, Mission Control said, "Copy moon joy." And that became a slogan.
People are getting it tattooed now.
They are, but you could say that to your child. Your child goes on and on about a video game. You could say, "Copy video game joy." And that would do it, right?
Yes.
Copy soccer joy, right? Sometimes we feel like we've got to feed back everything they just said, but maybe you could start that as a slogan in your family to validate these incredible narrating opportunities. Go forth, narrate, be narrated to, improve the ground plan of your education through the art of narration. Okay, that's another Brave Writer episode in the books. Thanks for joining Melissa and me today. We love it when you leave us reviews, when you send us comments via text message. We read them all. We also couldn't do this show without our fabulous production team at Nova, or Jeanette Hall, the Brave Writer team member who handles all those administrative details you know nothing about. In the meantime, we hope that you have a fantastic week. Keep going, think well. We're rooting for you.